Fantasy Football Show.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Serge.
My name is James.
Today is not an FPL day, however.
No, if you're here just for the FPL, thank you very much. We love you all.
And see you on the other side.
You can turn off for this one. We will speak to you again on Monday.
Yep. Are we recording on Monday, are we? Oh, nice.
Standard.
Today we're here to talk about Bury Football Club and probably the wider issue of football and finance. Because obviously Bury, whilst it's a tragic situation and not something you wish on any football club, it can't be taken in isolation. There's lots of other football clubs that are in the same situation and the same problems are arising again and again. But yeah, this is a follow-up. So a lot of people wanted us to talk about Bury when we put it out as an option in the People's Poll. And there's a lot happened in the last 2 weeks since that. Obviously, Bury were expelled from the Football League at the end of August, 27th of August. They'd missed their first 6 games, right, of the season because the EFL kicked them out. Well, they've suspended those games and then kicked them out of the league. And a whole host of stuff in between. Where do we start, James?
Well, I think we'd probably start a little bit with who are they? For people who just follow the Premier League and do want to understand a bit more about this, we should probably let people know who they are. So one of the originals, really, essentially, they got into the first division in 1895. They actually won a test match against Liverpool to earn promotion into the first division and relegate Liverpool. In an area, the northwest of England, which has been a hotbed and it still is for football. Yeah,
I mean, that Greater Manchester, where you've got the likes of Bolton and Wigan and all of these guys. There's so many clubs up that way.
They then won the FA Cup in 1900 and 1903.
Yeah, still holding that record,
Southampton 4-0 and beat Derby County 6-0, which I guess Bury got a little bit of limelight after City's win against Watford because it equalled Bury's record for biggest win in an FA
Over
Cup
110
final.
years or whatever it was.
That's and they stayed
record.
In the top division up, through the First World War into the sort of the mid 1920s, and essentially between the 1890s and the 1950s were always in the top 2 divisions.
Yeah.
Following that, they've spent essentially the majority of the next 60 to 70 years in the bottom 2 divisions, occasionally flirting with being back into Tier 2, what we now call the Championship. They own a very unique record for being the only football club to have scored 1,000 goals in all of the top 4 divisions.
Yep.
That will
That's
get broken at some point, but yeah, it is a great trivia question. At their peak, heading up into the Second World War, they were getting crowds of upwards of 30,000 towards, I think their record gates 35,000. And they have always played at Gig Lane, unlike many other football clubs who were formed that early, including our clubs. They've never had a different home stadium. Gig Lane has always been their home. And obviously, as time's gone on and as the elites have progressed further and the money's got more dominated into the Premier League and the Championship, it's become harder for clubs like Bury, particularly in that sort of area. I mean, they're so close to Manchester United and Old Trafford that a lot of the kids who grow up in Bury now will, unless it's kind of passed down through family ties and that, will gravitate towards going to support a United or a City or there's even so many other clubs in that area. Merseyside's not that far away. You've got your Burnleys, Blackburns, Prestons, even Bolton, who are probably Bury's real local side, who have all got far bigger support. And you've got Bury are not alone. There are other clubs in that area like Rochdale. We think Oldham Athletic might be one that's really struggling financially at the moment.
Please switch off your mobile phone before...
Yeah, absolutely. Crewe is not a million miles away. Stockport County, who in the mid-90s, remember the Ian Dowie own goal? Correct. In the Coca-Cola Cup quarter-final? I think it was 97, I think. Very nearly got to the League Cup final. They disappeared down the leagues. They're into, I think it's the Northern Premier North now, Stockport County. Wow. You would argue that I mean, Edgeley Park is probably a more modern stadium than Gig Lane. You might argue that they've got bigger support, and they've fallen through the leagues through financial hardship, Stockport, but never to this extent where you ain't playing football fixtures.
Mm. And so how did we end up where we are? So it was a case, what really intrigued me when I really delved into the Bury story, because cards on the table, and it's the same for most people. I don't pay much attention to League One or League Two. And it was League Two that they were in last season. And it all kind of came as a bit of a shock. So once we started doing our research and trying to find out what has happened, I was confused as to how a club has just got promoted and then within a matter of months been kicked out of the Football League. You'd think that on-field success leads to off-field success. But it just goes to show how far apart the business of football and what happens on the pitch really are. It was only at the beginning of December that Steve Dale took over the club, and things immediately started coming to light, and the wheels started coming off with players' unpaid wages, etc., that culminated in people trying to shut the club down before the season ended, a promotion, but then they've lost their manager, another winding up petition, an agreement with all the people that are owed money coming into play, takeover bids being put in and then being removed and then being withdrawn from the Football League in essentially an 8-month period. A 9-month period, let's say from the start of December. Mad.
There's a lot of envy in between. I wasn't aware of this at the time, but you are sort of hearing the fallout of things, that there was a lot of envy towards Bury in League Two, that in spite of their financial difficulties, they were paying some fairly serious wages at that level. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking anything like Premier League level wages, but a lot more than some of the others who have been coming through those leagues recently, like, say, Lincoln City, for example. And there's not a huge difference to be gained financially between League Two and League One, other than you will have a couple more glamour fixtures like Sunderland, for example, who are down there at the moment. But in terms of your TV revenue, kind of gates overall, there are not major differences between League Two and League One. It's only really once you hit the Championship, then you start getting the jumps. But there are clubs even in the Championship right now who I think there's a fear about. Mm-hmm. Definitely. And Bury, unfortunately, I'm not sure this is an isolated incident.
For Bury or for football clubs in total?
For football clubs.
Agreed. And the person that's been in the news the most is Steve Dale, obviously the current owner of the football club. And I'm going to say something controversial. I don't think he is the villain in the situation. I don't think he's done himself any favours, and there's definitely things he could have done better.
He is a huge part of this. But
how
this has started is not his fault.
No, completely. He could have done things better. He could have handled himself better, really. But if people are now turning on Steve Dale, then Stewart Day, who is the former owner of the club, is getting away with it.
So we should probably take a little timeline here in terms of Dale and the EFL. So talk
Correct.
About Stewart Day a little bit.
Stewart Day took over in 2013, I think. And the club wasn't in a great state then. But he took over in 2013, and the club was ticking along until then. But obviously gradually slipping further and further into financial difficulties. It's a classic case of when you're in debt, you don't tell the people around you. Or when you're struggling financially to save face, you don't tell people around you, oh yeah, we're in trouble. What do people do? They borrow money, right? They borrow money. They don't tell anybody about it. I've seen firsthand a company go into administration and liquidation within my family, right? You don't know about it until it smacks you in the face. That's why, because it's all swept under the carpet, because it's all right, I'll borrow that money, and when I've got that money, we'll invest it, and then it will all come good, and then the money will come in, and we'll pay back that debt and what have you. So the debt was building for a long time under Stewart Day. Nobody sells a football club for £1 unless there's real hidden debt within that. So the exact dates and the timelines of the loans that Stewart Day put in are a little bit wishy-washy, but I can give you a bit of light into some of them. But ultimately, there was a ton of debt. Steve Dale took over on the 1st of December. He paid £1 for the club, right, which is nothing. And then it emerges a couple of months later, oh, hang on a second, there's a whole bunch of debt within this club that I didn't know about. Now, this is where he's fucked up. You don't buy a football club or a business, which is a limited company, without doing your due diligence, right? You can't hide loans. And what's reported is a £4.2 million loan that Stewart Day's former company has put into the business. How do you buy a business? I mean, it might be a dumb question. How do you buy a business, which is what the football club is, and not know that there's a £4.2 million loan being repaid?
Exactly. It's got to be a claim, though, isn't it?
A claim? What do you mean by a claim?
Well, no, it's a claim that he wasn't aware of it, is what I mean.
Yeah, he's claiming that he wasn't aware of it.
He's claimed a lot of fucking things.
It was hidden in amongst the accounts. When you're buying and taking on a football club, you do your due diligence. I think when you buy a house, you get a house buyer's report. You do your due diligence. And Steve Dale's his business background is asset stripping, right? So he'll find companies that are in distressed situations that are going under. He'll buy them on the cheap. He'll break them up, so sell off all of the assets, sell off the stock, sell off the machinery, sell off the computers, sell off the property. And it's one of those situations where the individual bits are worth more than the running business. Make a profit and shut it down. He knows how to do due diligence on a business, yeah? One of the things that I read on one of the things online was that he's been involved with 55 different businesses, of which 43
were liquidated, yeah.
That doesn't mean that he's bad at running a business. He bought them to liquidate them. So that was always his intention.
Why would you... I don't know. I've got no business savvy like you, sure. Right? So educate me a little bit on that. Right, Why would you do that?
Right. So when a company's going into administration or liquidation or what have you, it's in a distressed state, right? So let me give you an example. You read about the voluntary arrangement, the CVA that happened earlier in the year. The CVA at the time was the company you get administrators and liquidators who are insolvency practitioners in essence. Their job is to try and rescue companies, and if not, wind them up and shut them down, but do it independently so that the guys that own the business can't bleed it dry before they sell it. So the CVA is them saying to all of the people they owe money, right, we owe you money. I think the debt at the time was £8 million for Bury. I don't have it. I can't afford to pay you. So either I'll give you some of the money and you write off the rest of the debt, or you're going to get nothing because I'm going to shut the whole company down because they're not going to get anything. And in the case of Bury, they agreed 25% of the CVA. You've got similar situations where the liquidators, the insolvency practitioners, will sell a business for less than the assets are worth because they don't have time to do it individually and whatever. They'll be like, okay, you know what, there's 10 million quid of assets, but if you give me 8 million quid cash now, I'll take it, then I'll divvy up the money to whoever it's done, and you then do what you want. If you can get more value for them, then great. But you're buying businesses, because they're in distressed situations, you're getting them on the cheap, basically. You then split them up and you can make a profit on it. So that's essentially what his background was. So he bought businesses which were fucked to strip off the bits and make a profit on it. So he would have known how to analyze how fucked a company is, basically.
Because and you're, just to clarify, you're referring to Day here or Dale?
Dale. Dale's business was asset stripping.
Dale bought the club in December for £1,
knowing that there was debt.
And we'll come back onto the problems with the EFL on that afterwards. But that immediately has to signal alarm bells for both buyer and seller. So
the seller knew it was fucked.
I went back and read the statement that was on Bury's website when Dale took over about how he wanted to link in with the community and earn the trust of the people and all of that. And then I saw him on the telly last week where he was saying, I've never been to Bury, and why would I ever go to Bury? Is it any wonder that forget the financials for a second. Yeah. This guy had no care for Bury Football Club. When I look back on
Steve Dale,
When I look back on Day, God, I wish it had slightly different names, these two.
Yeah, true.
But with Stewart Day, he obviously made numerous huge financial errors. He actually, by the looks of it, to me, looks like he had a little bit of a vision in terms of trying to build up the youth system within the football club to make it self-sufficient, where they would sell players. Like the older listeners will remember all the players that like Crew Alexandra used to send off in the 90s, like your David Platts, etc., Danny Murphys, who went on to become like full internationals and Premier League stars. And Bury were beginning to get a little bit of a reputation of bringing through good young players who were then getting sold probably only to sort of championship level on that originally, but it was bringing a little bit of money in. I said to you earlier today, they let go with this liquidation 140 players from their youth system are now obviously out of contract and free to find
140.
140.
140. Wow.
So I doubt there's many other clubs in the bottom two divisions who have got that many youth players on their books. I would be amazed. I don't know what the numbers are at the top of the Premier League clubs, but I guess it depends how many different age range and leagues you're entered in.
Under 16s a youth or
a lot of these kids, and this is one of the real sad things, a lot of them kids are never going to play football for a professional football club again. They just won't get found, right? Particularly in a hotly contested area like that. Some will, the best will, and the one who's driven enough will get picked up. They might have to drop down into sort of like the National League youth systems and stuff like that before they come back. But it was a vision. There was a financial model, I can see it, but it seems like everything off the idea of selling young footballers for profit, like all the other financial stuff was going on, was left in a complete crap heap. The stadium, I think we've all seen the pictures where people were going in to try and sort of clean the seats when suddenly the tickets for the Doncaster game went back on sale. And you could see even it had just been left in a decrepit state over the summer. It's not a modern football stadium in any case, but it had just been completely left
the club shop
to
was empty.
Shit. Yeah,
nothing had happened there at all.
Day comes in, buys the club for £1, and everyone thinks that everything's going to be all right all of a sudden. You nailed it. I mean, surely somebody there must have seen it and looked at it and gone, right, this guy has had 51 businesses previously, 43 of them have gone bust. Is this okay?
Well, he's made them go bust on purpose. Because the point was sell off everything shut the company down.
Do you think he made Bury Football Club go bust on purpose? Because I heard, you can answer that in a sec, I heard that when there were a couple of offers coming in very late to try and save the club, he was holding out for £2 million.
Yeah.
In what walk of life are you going to imagine a 2 million % profit on your investment in 6 months?
Yeah, you're
and
not.
And I'm not business savvy again, so please explain to me how that would work.
Yeah, I mean, look, saying that he wanted the business to go bust on purpose, I don't think so, because he's not going to be left with anything. I don't know what he's taken out of the business along the way, but there was a couple of rumours around that he'd taken £115,000.
Yeah, there was some money gone missing.
He said that he'd taken that money to pay suppliers and he's got a paper trail for it. I don't know. That wasn't widely reported. There was a couple of articles in the Times around that. And that could be the case. But 115,000, I know it's for most people that's a lot of money in this scale. If you're gonna do fraud, you're gonna do it for bigger. If it goes bust, he himself personally will not benefit in any way whatsoever. So what they're saying is the company's got £8 million of debt, and that includes the loans from Stewart Day's old company, HMRC, unpaid wages, and so on and so on. That makes up about £8 million. If the company goes bust now, which it could do, although I think the reality is someone will actually come in and buy it.
Well, it's still in existence, is worth saying, isn't
it?
It's
not
of course.
Like nothing's happened yet.
Clubs like the last one who went, Maidstone United, and Aldershot Town before that, who went in the early 90s, physically ceased to exist, basically. Whereas Bury as an entity still exists as a business, just doesn't exist playing football.
Anyone that comes in is going to say, right, okay, you want me to take over Bury Football Club, right? So you want me to take your £8 million debt, and you want me to pay you £2 million for the pleasure of taking your £8 million debt. Therefore, you're asking me for £10 million. I don't think anyone's going to be paying that price for Berry. What happened with Stewart Day was interesting. He was a property developer. He's had a few failed businesses as well that have gone into liquidation, property companies and that kind of thing. And he had taken loans out over the course of his time being the chairman of Berry, and repaid a lot of them as well. But every time he took a loan, he secured it as a mortgage, as you would on Gig Lane.
So against the asset of
against
the stadium,
the asset of the stadium.
Yeah.
But then it got repaid. In the final year and a half, he had another company, Maderco is what I found. It's on, I can't remember which article I read on it, but Maderco, it was a property development company that was building student housing in Bradford. And they got loads of investors, and they were building 160 student flats in Bradford. He'd taken money from investors for like a 5-year guaranteed rent scheme and whatever. So invest your money, buy one of my flats, 100 grand or whatever, you get guaranteed rent for 5 years. That company lent £3.7 million to Berry Football Club.
Right, okay, yeah.
That company lent 4.2 million to Berry Football Club. Now, that company has gone bust. All the people who invested in that are not getting their rental money from the flats that they bought, these student flats. So like, hang on a second, we didn't invest in your company so you could use that company to fucking lend money to Berry. They're going to try and recover it. Now, if that company's gone bust, it's the insolvency practitioner or whatever's job to go and say, right, okay, let me get all the money we're due in and let me pay off everyone that I can as best I can. It might only be 50p in the pound, and then close it down and shut it down. So that company's gone bust. But the people who have invested in it are like, yo, we want our money back from Berry, 4.2 million or whatever. There's also talk about a £3.7 million loan from a company called Capital Business Finance or something like that, which is secured on Gig Lane. And that's the stupid interest loan. So the talk is that it's 10% a month interest on that £3.7 million.
I've seen that, yeah.
Which is 138% a year. And they said it's £1,500 a day in interest. I've tried to do the maths on that. It doesn't quite add up to 10% a month.
What does it add up to?
1% a month, but 12% a year. On 3.7 million, 10% a month would be 370 grand. Divided by 30 days would be 10,000 a day or something, 12,000 a day.
So are you saying right now?
Interest.
Is that what Berry are losing right now? Is £10,000 a day?
That's what they're supposed to be paying out in that. When Dale issued a statement after they'd been kicked out, he said that he'd been in talks with that company to have a 2-year holiday on repayments for the capital part of that loan. Holiday on repayments whilst they sorted their shit out. But yeah, so Stewart Day basically borrowed money from places that he shouldn't have and has taken very high interest loans and plugged them into Berry. And that's bleeding them dry. The problem is that Steve Dell should have seen that before he bought the club for £1. He should have seen that because he would have then been very obvious. Now, someone
is
comes
there no way that he could have?
Yeah, he should have, could have. He must have. There's no way.
I'm just going back to this idea that all his previous businesses were liquidated, and you're saying that's something he would have wanted.
What, to liquidate those businesses?
Yeah,
because once he's sold off all the assets.
This guy clearly didn't give
here, right? If we sell off all the stock, all the computers, all the desks, and everything, and there's no staff left, what's the point in the company anymore? You just shut it down. So that's what he was doing.
This guy clearly didn't care about this football club.
Steve Dell?
I don't believe he gave a shit about it.
Well, you're making the assumption there that he always was going to shut it down. I don't think that would have been his mindset, because a football club is not like a business because of the community element.
No, but all football clubs are businesses now,
whether
we like it or not.
But the media fallout and the impact in the community, he wouldn't have been able to get away with. I think he thought that he could take the debt, restructure it to cheaper debt, and then sell the business on. I've no doubt he bought it to sell it on later. I just think he thought he had more time to restructure the debt. Because if you take that £8 million debt, go to any corporate finance and try and get a 3 or 4% a year loan, your repayments suddenly come down and you've got a reasonable run in business. But I think the likes of CNN, Sporting Risk, or whoever CNN were looking at it.
Analytics company.
Yeah, probably looked at it and thought, you know what, restructuring this debt and getting out of this hole with the 12-point deduction is going to be too much. Or Steve Dale, was being unreasonable in what he was asking for. Listen, I've had the offers thrown at me before. I had a company offered to me where we were talking minuscule numbers, 3 members of staff, hardly any time. But the guy that was running it, it was not making money or losing money. It was kind of break even, but it was like, I don't have the time to run it. Take 60% of the company for nothing and help get something, because I'd rather have 40% of something than 100% of nothing. What he's probably trying to do is get too much value out of the business at this point, saying, you know what, I've got something worth something. You're like, no, mate, you got £8 million of debt.
At the end, if he was holding out for 2 million, and we don't know the numbers financially that he was being offered.
No,
it could have been 100 grand. I don't know. But if he was being offered a million, let's say,
personally.
To sell the club.
Plus, whoever will take the debt.
They'll take the debt on. Why needs it? Considering how bad it got, why would he have not taken that money?
It's a very good question. Unless he thinks he can get more.
But that's what they're saying, isn't it? He was holding out for 2 million.
There is talk of him. He set up some other companies in the meantime. I forget the name, but there was 2 specific things that he did. So there must be a limited company for Bury Football Club. It's called a Bury Football Club Limited. He set up Bury Heritage, and what he did was he transferred all of the memorabilia and trophies and some of those assets into that company. And he set up another company to transfer the stadium into. And that other company was the one that was going to be saddled with all the debt. And then the football trading club would be safe, pay rent to the stadium company, and then that company would start repaying the debt. That's how he was trying to restructure it. Whether or not he had the pockets deep enough to do that is interesting. Because now we're talking about Villa have been investigated. Pride Park is being investigated about who owns the stadium and who's paying rent to who for the stadium.
Reading and someone else as
Reading,
well.
Was it? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was Villa Derby, it was Reading and another club.
So how these deals are being structured is interesting.
So what we're saying here is, and it kind of, some people might have seen the news in the last 48 hours or so about this asset movement that essentially is that what it is?
Stripping, yeah.
So essentially, you've got someone who runs a football club like your guy who runs Villa, and he's moved the asset of Villa Park to one company while they were in the Championship, and now moved it back under the PLC or whatever it is of Aston Villa. Now they're back in the Premier League. And there's a bit of an investigation going on in terms of how that works into financial fair play and stuff.
It's creative accounting.
Should that be legal?
Well, now you're into like finance and accounting, right?
Or to put it a different way, why would you do that? Are you not, if I'm to be a skeptic on this, would you not just do that because you're trying to hide something?
You're trying to paint a picture. So let me give you an example for you and the listeners that might make sense. And this is
put it in football terms, for God's sakes.
Unrelated to maybe this specific example, but it shows you what you can do. So companies publish a set of accounts, right? Profit and loss and a balance sheet and all the rest of it. That is a snapshot of where the business is at this moment in time, potentially, right? So it's a picture that you're painting. Now you can paint the picture in a number of different ways. So take a business. We sold £100 worth of stuff. That stuff cost us £50, and we made 50 quid profit in at the end of the day. So 100 minus 50 is 50. Now, in that time, I had to buy a computer to work, which cost me 50 quid, right? So now I've got the stuff that I bought and the computer, which means how much profit am I left with?
Nothing.
0. Exactly. However, that computer is going to last me 5 years. Therefore, is it right to take that 50 quid out of my profit and loss for 1 year, or should I do £10 a year for 5 years?
Would that be a little bit like when you talk about, say,
depreciation and all that?
When I'm thinking about, we hear in sort of Premier League terms, if you will, net spends on transfers, but it doesn't equate for wages.
Of course.
And the asset of what it brings you over that time.
If I spread my computer over 5 years, then now it looks to you like I've made 40 quid profit, 100, 10, 50, 40 left, right? But for my bank account, I've had to pay for the whole computer.
Yeah.
I might want to show investors or the bank more profit, because if I have a healthy profit, they're going to lend me more money. So I've creatively spread the computer over 5 years to show more profit so they'll lend me more money. Who decides how many years I can spread my computer over?
The guy you're buying it from.
No, I do. I can
Why?
decide. I can decide whether I want to spread it over 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever.
So do you think
you just have to be able to justify it?
Do you think in transfers now, for example, trying to keep the football element in this?
Yeah, of course.
No. Just like because we see in football transfers now, it's becoming more and more common where someone will spend £50 million on a player and it's 10 million over 5 years.
Yep.
You think it's the buyer that makes that choice?
No, you choose yourself. It's just a case of like, if HMRC, the government, come to me, say I spread my computer over 25 years in my accounts, right? So there's like £2 coming out of it. If they came to me and said, why have you can't justify spreading over 25 years because computers don't last 25 years. But anywhere from 2 to 5 is reasonable. You might be one of those people that changes it every 2 years. You might try and long it out for 5 years. It's what's reasonable. You decide yourself. But say I buy that computer, I decide that I'm going to long it out over 5 years. After 3 years, that computer's bust. That other 20 quid that's sitting there in my account, that has to come out in that third year now all of a sudden. So you can shoot yourself in the foot a little bit with it. But my overriding point is that accounts, when you read them, and numbers that you read about and are displayed can be manipulated. You're not doing anything illegal. You're just painting the picture that you want to paint.
Do you think we'd see a lot of this if we looked at Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain's accounts?
100%. 100%. They have teams of accountants that are designed to, at the end of the year, like, because you pay tax based on your profits, right?
Yes.
Private businesses are designed, and so should their aim be to pay as little tax as possible because that's a private corporation. They use creative accounting. And what's happened here is an example of that. Now, Stewart Day could have done creative accounting, but you cannot. One thing I'm telling you, though, is you cannot do creative accounting to hide a £3.7 million loan. Or if you can, fucking someone from Stewart Day's accountancy firm phone me up because I'm interested in what the fuck you've done to hide that loan, especially when it's secured. Because if you want to buy a house, right? You run searches. It will tell you what debt is secured on a property.
I mean,
it's public.
I'd ask the wife to buy it.
Exactly. It's public. That kind of thing, when you put a charge on a property, is public record.
Yeah.
It has to be registered with the public, whoever the fuck it is, HMRC or whoever. So it's public record. So there's no way that was missed, in my opinion. It's interesting stuff that they're doing. But it leads to that wider picture of, like, football clubs are not necessarily always run with a profit and loss in mind, and that's where financial fair players come in to make sure that clubs should have to make a profit at the end of the year.
Well, we think that the majority of the clubs in Football League are losing money quite badly. If you take a club that's done really well and sort of punched above their weight in the last couple of years in the bottom two divisions, Accrington Stanley, Who are they? Exactly.
Who are they?
Now, one of the things Accrington really want to do is essentially, in terms of size of club, and they're a Football League original as well from the 1880s, they get very sparse crowds, sort of average kind of 2,000-3,000, not too dissimilar to what it's been for Bury for the last 10 years or so. And one of the things Accrington wanted to do and tried to push for is to cut up the pitch and make it artificial.
Yep.
So they could use the stadium 365 days a year. Well, obviously, that's not what most people want to watch. And obviously, there's a lot of opposition against that sort of thing. But the problem clubs like Accrington and Bury have got is they're wasting away cash. They can't ever go and spend money and buy a footballer. Essentially, all they're relying on, the good people of the community coming and paying and getting through the turnstiles. Mm-hmm. That keeps them going. So the more fixtures they have, the better. That's why, people harp on about the Checker Trade Trophy or whatever it's called this year. These clubs need that additional fixture, even if it is just a gate of 1,000 or 2,000, and the hope that they will get someone like with Stewart Day, who will come through a youth academy, and you can sell them for, if it's 200-300 grand, that might pay the staff for a month or two, right?
Sure, but the Premier League clubs are doing the same. Like you look at Chelsea's academy, City's academy; they're profit-making machines as well,
massively,
and they're doing it way better than any League One and League Two club ever potentially
but
can.
then their assets are so much better.
Of course, but this is
the problem with, say, for like a Bury is if there's an amazing kid there at 15 now, he's getting bought when he's 15. You ain't getting bought when he's 20.
You're not getting the maximum value potentially. The thing that's changed a lot in football is where the money's coming from and where the money's going. Because now TV is getting a bigger and bigger and bigger part of the incoming money. More that like match days now don't matter as much as they used to by any stretch. And players are taking a bigger and bigger chunk out because wages are going up. So where your money used to come from in the old days is now TV, and where it's going is in player power. And clubs, I don't think, have been able to adapt to that necessarily. Now, look at the Spanish league, Real Madrid and Barcelona. So we think we have it bad, yeah? Forget about it. Basically, they dominate, dictate terms for everything in that league. You got a little bit of Atletico Madrid, maybe Valencia and Sevilla. But Barca and Real do what the fuck they want, and everyone else feeds off the scraps. We at least have some level of, like, even the likes of West Ham and what have you, we would be in the top 20 earning clubs in Europe financially, and we're probably only like 10th, 11th in the UK, in England, but there's more depth in where the money's going. In other countries, it's way worse. But Germany is probably a much, 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 much better model.
Well, Germany's interesting because there's a lot of fan-owned clubs in Germany.
It's almost mandatory.
And the one that's doing it in England at the moment is AFC Wimbledon, who are an example of a Phoenix club who had their identity stolen by Pete Winkleman and Milton Keynes Dons, who the majority of football fans have got no time for and don't even want to register as a football club. But AFC Wimbledon went right down the pyramid to sort of, I think they had about 6 promotions in a row, right? And was still only at like National League. And they've built it up to the point they are about to go back into a brand new stadium in Wimbledon, playing at the same kind of level as Milton Keynes, which is, for people who have followed me on Twitter for a long time, I've spoken about it a number of times, really like to see that club, AFC Wimbledon, particularly do well. The problem is with, say, because there's a lot of talk now about Bury and should they become, is there a way of doing it and stopping these catastrophes like what's happened with them by fan ownership clubs? The problem is AFC Wimbledon started again completely and then have built their way consistently over time and never had an expenditure above their means. I think their level now at sort of League One, you know, they might get fortunate at some stage to hit a year or two in the Championship, but it's probably where they would max out as a fan-owned football club. That's as far as the dream could ever take you.
Investment. It's like one of my mates, Johnny D, who I go down to West Ham with regularly, right? And we talk about we're buying players, and I'm like, 45 million on Allaire or whatever. His attitude is, it's not my money, is it? Like, let the owners spend their money. Let them get the players, because we go week in, week out, and we spend what we can on tickets and all the rest of it. They're the ones with the money. They decide to buy the club.
I spend whatever they put the price at.
Exactly. So fuck it. It's their decision. Yeah. Let them spend it and let them give us the players, because we deserve some joy on the pitch. But if they're going above and beyond what they can afford, you're going to end up in a situation like you have with Bury. And I think income inequality is a concern. But more than that, I don't think the FA or the EFL or whoever it may be are regulating the clubs to the extent that they could or should. Like the scrutiny that's going into every club in terms of how profitable are they, how sustainable are they, is not there, because I don't think they have the appetite for it. It's state versus private companies, right? To what extent do you become a dictatorship where they have that power? Because these are privately owned companies. They're business people who can do what the hell they like. It's my money, it's my club, it's my club, I can do what I want. And they don't really have the right to interfere in private business. But they should. Because we have to accept that football is part of the community.
It is to clubs. It is to clubs like this, to Bury.
In this country, right? It's tribalism. It used to be in the old days when we were living in caves, we all had our own tribes and we used to fight because we lived in different tribes and caves and whatever the fuck. And then as we've developed over time, we can't fight each other because of countries and whatever. But football's replaced that tribalism within us. And I think we need it in our DNA for some stupid reason. We're just those humans need it.
I don't know how people live without football personally. I just don't know how you can not have that love for a club.
Things. I think football clubs are such a big part of the community.
The problem with the EFL is, and you're saying should they or shouldn't they get involved? They were under pressure because of certain clubs, because of what happens, kind of instigated. There was the ITV Digital collapse in 2002. Which was huge because ITV Digital spent way beyond their means trying to somehow make the Football League and their rights of it a competitor to the Premier League, which there's no way of doing that.
Yeah.
And they put too much money into it too soon. Now, Sky, who obviously get a lot of criticism for their coverage of football and obviously the Big Six or the Big Two, whatever it is this week, have stepped in and have covered the Football League since. Mm-hmm. And championship clubs on the whole and the money they receive from Sky and who is it, Quest paying the highlights these days is critical, right? That's money that is safe and it's coming in.
Yeah,
it's remarkable that nobody fell by the wayside of the ITV Digital collapse.
True.
Then obviously in the late noughties you had a real sort of mainstream case of massive financial troubles in terms of when Portsmouth hit administration while being in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. Obviously they had points deduction in the Premier League, the only side that ever has. Before that was obviously Leeds tried to essentially buy the Champions League before it was too late. Yeah. Before the money. I mean, there was cases at Leeds where I heard someone telling me a story the other week. Seth Johnson turned up for contract talks. I think He'd had one good season at Derby and one England cap, and the target was to go in the meeting and ask for 30 grand, and Leeds opened up the offer with there's 50 grand for you, and they just went, okay, fine, we'll sign. And that's how badly some of these clubs were being run. And Portsmouth had a number of different owners beyond Milan Mandaric, who people might remember was chairman when Harry Redknapp was there, who didn't really help the situation beyond that. And that's kind of where the fit and proper test came into effect. When Steve Dale bought Bury for £1, there was no fit and proper test.
Yeah, that's what
I've heard. And nobody can answer
it.
Why that happened. There was a take and a theory that it was so bad at Bury that how could it get any worse? Well, it has got worse.
Yeah. He took on the poison chalice. He should have done his due diligence and homework before and done everything he could to restructure it. He walked in... I think what he's claimed that he didn't know and it was hidden and all the rest of it, I don't fully buy. I'm not 100% sold that he was there to fuck up the club. I think he did want to try and do something. He was there to make money, but he was there
for money for himself. There's no doubt about that.
Sure, but he needed
I don't think he wanted this.
No, he wanted to turn the club around to be able to make more money, but that hasn't worked out. And if what he's saying, take his words on face value, he didn't know about that, well, then you're a fucking idiot. Honestly,
the alarming point out of this is now obviously Bury are not a football, not a competitive football team this season. We don't quite know what's going to happen next.
No,
this guy could still make money here, couldn't he?
Yeah.
That's bollocks.
Well, do you know the real?
That's what I mean
there?
In terms of you have to question: does he care? Because he might still get his $2 million offer.
Do you know where he'll make money? And we've seen this potentially as an issue with Coventry with their stadium. If he was to shut the club down, knock down Gig Lane and build flats, that's probably how he'd make the most amount of fucking money. Do a property deal on it. I mean, look, Coventry had that similar situation, right, where they didn't own their stadium because they'd sold the property off. Like, property is one of the biggest, most sought after assets and things that developers will always be looking for, right? A property developer won't give a shit about Bury Football Club. They'll buy that site, put a fucking Tesco extra on it and some flats on the other side and bish bash bosh. They're good to go.
Well, we know.
And it'll be forgotten in 12 months.
Enfield Town, which essentially is it's not my local football club, but it's the closest football club technically to where I live now. They used to play on Southbury Road. I don't know, I'm mentioning the name of the road like all the listeners are going to know. The main road in Enfield. Yeah. But it's a cinema complex and that, isn't it? It used to be a football stadium there. My Spurs used to take a team there at the end of every season. My dad used to take me there when I was in like single digit numbers. And they've only recently actually come back into Enfield, having had to play in Cheshunt for a few years. And it does emphasise the point. Like, you're Enfield Town, right? We're going to we're going to build a cinema here. Fuck you.
I'll be interested to know, like, Gooners, how much they made off the apartments on the old site of the Highbury. It wouldn't surprise me if it covered the good 20-25% of the cost.
I think they still are, and Tottenham are trying to get on the development ladder as well.
That's going to cover 20-25% of the cost of the new stadium or whatever. That's a big chunk of change just off a property deal. So the income inequality is a big problem, and the ability to sustain it. Look at Man City.
That with Bury, because I kind of mentioned it at the start of the pod, is like they've always played there. That's the worst one of all. Like, if they take their home.
Yeah. I mean,
that's frightening, mate.
But this is the business of football now.
I guess the worrying concern would be especially if Bury have to go and start again in, I don't know, the 10th tier of English football, which seems unlikely. They've obviously just been expelled from the 3rd tier. There is an argument of case that they could go back into the 4th tier or the 5th or the 6th tier maybe. But if they did have to start again at tier 10, then it would be great for these small clubs. Bury might play Enfield Town. Like, it would be great for Enfield Town if Bury brought a few hundred fans down to London or something, and it would be a name game, would get a sort of interest in the local communities. It's good from that perspective, but if Bury don't have their football stadium, then where are they going to play? Do they then have to go and play? Imagine that. Well, Bury have opened doors for other teams previously. FC United of Manchester, when they were formed as this kind of Phoenix club off the back of all the green and gold campaign against the Glazers, they played at Gig Lane and were on occasion getting bigger attendances than Bury, by the way. But yeah, that's quite. I'd not considered that as an idea that they wouldn't go back in and play in their same football stadium. That's quite a frightening thought.
It could easily happen now. So, okay, take this as a scenario. Someone comes in and says, I'll buy the stadium site off you for £10 million. Would you take it? Because at that point, you're saying you keep the club, the debts are clear, the football club carries on, you just don't have a home anymore.
But 10 million can't build you a new football stadium, can it?
No, it can't, but you could ground share or, I don't know.
Where? Did they end up at one of these like Rochdale or Bolton, who fortunately have been saved, or a Stockport County or someone like Macclesfield?
So
that's not a Bury's a community, right? It's a place, yeah. So Bury, they don't want. I've had all that with Spurs, right? It's different level. I get that, but I've just seen my team not playing Tottenham for 18 months. It's awful, right? So I mean, what's happened to them is horrendous. But the idea, I think, the hope for all Bury fans at the moment would be, all right, look, we start at League Two, we start at National League, whatever, but keep the football club in Bury now, under the flagship of Bury Football Club. They go and start ground sharing in Rochdale or whatever. Not really Bury anymore, are they?
They won't be, but it will come back. Now, on a more positive note, I suppose there has been talks about them. They're talking about trying to get into League Two for next season. I feel like that door hasn't been shut. But
it won't be for a while.
But also, a little bit of it's just paying lip service to keep the fans happy before going crazy and riots. Unless a real solid takeover comes on board. Because the thing is, now they're going to set a precedent, right? You go into liquidation or administration or you're screwed and you can't play your games. You're out for a season, but the year before, you're just going to come back a division lower.
Well, the thing is, if they'd have fulfilled their fixtures this year, with the state of the finances and with the 12-point deduction, you're even seeing Bolton. I don't think Bolton have scored it. Bolton have got a minus 12 as well, haven't they?
Yeah.
They've got 1 point and haven't scored a goal yet. Like, Bolton are fulfilling their fixtures, and look, they bought 8 players on transfer deadline day. I mean, they didn't buy; they got more in frees and loans. But they're getting people in who they're playing wages who can play football for them.
Yeah.
But they're almost certainly going to get relegated to League Two. So they've fought to fulfil it, and they're going to start at the same level as Bury next year. Doesn't quite feel right. And I know it's awful for Bury fans, etc. And for the longer term, obviously, if they can just start again in League Two, then the chances of it being re-established as a stronger football club is obviously greater. And they could go to National League North or whatever, which is like tier 6, and they might never come back to the Football League. But I feel like, as much as I have sympathy for them massively, I'm not sure it's right that they go back into League Two, personally.
I don't think they should go back into League Two. Yeah, I don't think so either, but it's not very easy. But what does it say about
I think that there's a chance they might, because I think that there's so much blame here on the EFL as well, a little bit, in the fact they didn't. I really do believe genuinely, from all I forget this lady's name, Janet, someone.
Jarvis, was it, or something along those lines?
I forget her name.
Yeah, but
you could tell she was properly gutted that they had to get to and don't forget this deadline kept getting extended.
Yeah.
Like, you're getting to a position where you're 3 weeks into a football season, you're not playing football yet. At some point, you've got to make a decision and go, right, for the security of the other teams in the league, we have to make a decision here.
Yeah.
And it already got pushed back days and weeks, etc. I feel like at the end, the Football League tried everything they could to help and assist Bury.
Yeah,
and the people in the know seem to say that. The problem was that the EFL let Bury down over the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, it wasn't just the EFL as well. It was the courts, the winding up petition. Because you go to the High Court, right? Someone puts a winding up petition on your car. If you don't pay some of the money that you're owed, they can file a CCJ, a court claim, right?
What?
A CCJ, County Court Judgment.
If you say so.
So you go and say, right, James Linden hasn't paid me my money. You can dispute it.
That's standard. That's sham if Wilshere gets 80 plus points.
If you can dispute it, but if you don't, they'll say, right, okay, fair play. We've checked it all out and we agree James owes you £100. Judge Judy style, stamped. At the point that I have that judgment, I can do anything I want now to get that money back off you, which is send in the bailiffs. Send in the bailiffs, and you've got no assets or no money, then I'll shut your business down, basically. That's a winding up petition. So it was Chris Brass was the first one that issued the winding up petition. He was their former manager that hadn't been paid. Or is it either former manager or former player? Yeah. And this is back in early part of the year. So they went to High Court for a winding up petition. Then Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, that were obviously going to be owed shit tons of money, picked up the mantle and they were like, oh, okay, fine. Well, if you're going after them for whatever he is, we're owed more. Let's just keep bunching together. That winding up petition got kicked forward twice and then got thrown out finally. So even the court were like, you know what? We'll give you a bit of time. I don't know the ins and outs of why it got kicked forward, but it did. And it got thrown out eventually, because Steve Dale was saying, I've got buyers and I'm ready to sell the club and it will sort itself out. So they're like, fine, go and sort your shit out. But it didn't. So they helped, the courts helped, the EFL did what they could. Probably everyone, no one comes out of this fucking smelling of roses.
No,
today.
well, he didn't help himself as well, Dale, but doing like things like going on TalkSport and stuff.
Yeah.
Like putting himself out there with like, was it Howard? I forget the player's name. Who come on and was like, I'm going to lose my house and all this shit. And he was coming back at him saying, no, you're not. And you think, how the fuck do you know? You've already said you've never even been to Bury and never will go to Bury.
Yeah. They didn't get their wages for a while, and then the PFA stepped in and paid 50% of the wages for March and April, but that wasn't until May. So they didn't get March, April money. I don't know what happened from May onwards, but they only got half their money for those months.
What?
And these guys are not fucking 100,000 a week. You're talking almost
real life
10, 15,000 pound a month maybe.
As footballers, they would be earning a very, very good life in comparison to us.
Yeah.
But it's not a
millionaire's lifestyle.
No, it's not even a 17-year-old's footballers in the Premier League, right? Nowhere near.
No.
What will happen to all the money that Bury still owe now? What happens to that?
It depends. It depends. So the CVA, the creditors' voluntary arrangement, was the agreement that they reached in July, and that was an agreement that was voluntarily agreed by the people that were owed the money, saying we'll accept 25p for every pound you owe us. So that's still in place from my understanding, but that needs to be administered. So they need to get the money in to be able to pay that.
Because technically Bury Football Club is still a business, if not a playing football team, that should still be happening, is what you're saying. The problem is they've got them outgoings down, isn't exactly like what I said in the reference to Accrington. They've got no income in.
Nah. There was talk that they had 600 grand that was being withheld by the EFL or whoever had access to their bank account. But again, I don't know the ins and outs of that. But they were saying that they've got cash that's being sat on and frozen because of this whole
Well,
situation.
he kept coming out every week when they were having games suspended. They all kept coming out, didn't he, and saying, "I've shown them the funds." And every week it was like, you need to show us by midnight on the Tuesday or whatever if you want to play this fixture this week. And then next morning you'd see him on the radio or whatever. I've shown them everything. And then next week you're still getting suspended again.
Yeah, his smoke and mirrors from him a lot.
It's a liar, weren't he?
Yeah, for sure. He did want to get out of that situation because he ain't gonna come out of it with a lot of profit in the end, but we'll soon find out. But what does it tell us about the bigger game of football, man, money wise? I mean, it's the one thing in football that I don't like is the amount of money swirling around in football.
It's a problem from top to bottom, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, to give you a perspective, I mean, Alexis Sanchez could have used a month's wages to buy Berry, couldn't he?
Exactly.
And for the exact money that
That's
Dale
the
wanted.
irony. And he hadn't even played for the fucking month, right? He didn't have to work for it. I'm sure he's trained and whatever.
I've heard people who have said, why didn't United or City just buy them?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's even lawful, but I mean,
I don't think it necessarily.
I don't think it's ethically correct. I don't think that should work. I think suddenly then it becomes Manchester United B, for example.
Yeah.
It's not Berry then. I don't know. Where does it start? It starts from the top. If you think of what did Scudamore get paid off from the Premier League clubs? Was it 250 grand each from each club, wasn't it, or something ridiculous? You think fucking hell, but then why should the Premier League clubs give 5 million to Berry and not give it to another struggling financial club like an Accrington or Bolton or Rochdale or Macclesfield or whomever? It doesn't have to be someone in that region, and that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, success is measured on the pitch. So if you give someone a financial advantage that affects what happens on the pitch, then that really skews things a lot. But I mean, you know what? The interesting thing is, like, we talk about the Premier League and football and the richest league in the world and stuff. Some of the money that our players get paid pales into insignificance when you look at American sport. If you want to look at like American sport and American inequality overall, and we've got plenty of listeners in America, but there are 3 people in America, 3 human beings that have more money than the bottom 50% of the population. So you got Bill Gates, Mr. Microsoft. You got Jeff Bezos, the Amazon guy, and we got Warren Buffett, who is the Berkshire Hathaway investor, right? The 3 of those guys have more money than 180 million people in America. But you look at the likes of LeBron and these guys, American football stars, they're earning double and triple sometimes what our top paid Premier League footballers are earning.
Well, the £1 million a week player is coming
very soon. And it's just fascinating. I mean, look, ultimately, it's the game we know and love, right? You go week in, week out to watch the excitement of the goals going in and all the rest of it. But there needs to be more control over it because of the impact that it has within the local community. But I don't think overall it's going to happen because we live in an age where governments and regulatory bodies don't want to put pressure on private individuals, because why is it my right as a governing body to affect your rights to do whatever the hell you want to do with your money?
There is a mass distinction between, and Suj and I are very fortunate to support the clubs that we do support, as much as we occasionally moan about the pros and cons of Tottenham and West Ham. We're very fortunate to support big clubs in a big city. There's a divide between the elite, and I think Tottenham and West Ham financially are in that. You said West Ham are in the top 20 richest in the world at the moment. I think that's probably correct. I think I've seen Everton are as well, and Newcastle on the fringes of that as well. I think Leicester probably. To those who spend the odd year in the Premier League, like the Huddersfield, who don't really ever feel like they were part of it. I don't think. And then obviously even further down the food chain to your clubs that we mentioned, like Bury, who they just feel like they're community football clubs now. I don't think like people like us can really understand how that feels. I understand one of the things for me, as I've already said, is like the feeling of self-belonging of Tottenham being in Tottenham is massively important to me. That's my home. But I go into a football stadium where they've just spent £1 billion on the fucking thing, right?
Have you bought any pick and mix yet? That's what I want to know.
I ain't buying no pick and mix, man.
Popcorn?
Seriously, I've had a beer now in the old
fill
through
up
the
from
bottom.
The bottom stuff.
Clever that. A little
Nice.
tip for you: don't push the bottom.
Afterwards, this is how.
No, why it's there? Because when you get that beer, so you put the beer down and the beer comes in through the bottom. It's like it looks like a little poker chip. Hold it together. Okay. You can't help the fascination of how does this work. Yeah, not a good idea. I won't try.
You lose your beer.
Don't try that again. But yeah,
it's amazing. Like, I was just looking at the London Stadium and the West Ham fans. Like the West Ham fans' anger towards the owners. How long ago was it that the fans invaded the pitch and we had that flag stuck in the
that
middle?
was Burnley game. It was only the end of sort of springtime 18,
March, April,
wasn't it?
2018. We're talking about 15 months ago.
Yeah.
That everyone was daggers out at the owners. The owners put their hands in their pocket to buy.
It's a little bit like a little bit of self. There was an old fella, and I feel bad to give an example. It was an old fella. It was an old fella. It was on a Man United YouTube channel, like Arsenal fan TV. He was crying outside St Mary's at the weekend. Get some perspective, like when the club down the road's just gone out of existence the day before.
Yeah, I do. I saw that actually on.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I saw
I think those who support the big clubs, like we don't realise how blessed we are.
Oh, 100%,
like you go home, you sulk about losing at home to Newcastle. It's football, innit? You go again next week. You get the adrenaline back. I mean, I can't imagine. Just forget even all the financials, which we've obviously spent a lot of time talking about, and what might happen next. The football club that you're not going to support is not playing football for at least another 11 months, basically.
That it's just mad. What do you do with your weekends? And
what do you do?
Weird.
You don't. If they go out of existence, you can't go and support someone else. You think any Bury fan's going to start going, "I might be a good time to start supporting Man United now"? It ain't fucking happening, mate. These guys, and there are so as time goes on, it's getting harder and harder for these clubs, because unless it's kind of passed down like a family chain, like I was given no choice but to support Tottenham.
Yeah.
Then the people are kind of not given the choice to the family tree to be a Bury fan, or are not taken to Gig Lane. Well, no, they are going to grow up supporting Man United or whomever else, if it's City, whatever. Those days are getting harder and harder, and it's another reason why we should all be really concerned about what's happening with Football League clubs.
Yeah. Because
the tendencies just over time for clubs like that are going to keep getting worse. And I noticed I've applied for we've got Colchester in the League Cup, so I've applied for a ticket. It's £25. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of a piss take, really, but I don't blame them. They've got to take that and run with that, because the money they'll make off that day will probably pay for the wages for a month or whatever, in terms of what they'll get exposure from media, etc., the ticket sales. Ticket sales at that level for the quality of football, I think, are quite expensive. I think you probably are. If you want to go to Charlton, for example, I think you are regularly paying sort of 20, 25 quid, whereas I can go to the Emirates for an away game and pay 30 quid.
Yeah, that's because they cap away ticket.
Yeah, I get that.
A little bit, but
listen, I'm paying sort of in excess of 60 quid a game, don't get me wrong. I mean, you couldn't charge your lot that.
£32, man.
Place would be empty, mate.
£32. The thing is, it wouldn't. They'd fill it, but it would just be
school kids.
It just wouldn't be fans.
School kids with free tickets.
It wouldn't be fans, mate. It's not that. We could increase the prices and the stadium would be full. It's London based, and you're next to the shopping centres that access in and out. It's not bad, but they wouldn't be the fans. It would be a different breed of person coming to the games. But look, that's
another matter on another podcast.
Before we decided to hit the record button, we had no idea how long we were going to chat for.
How long have we been talking for?
1 hour, 3 minutes.
Oh my gosh, that's way too long.
Yeah. I've enjoyed chatting about it, though.
Your business acumen, man. Fucking hell.
I'm just trying to understand where's the money. Like, you need to really dig deep, and even that is information that I've gleaned from here, there, and everywhere. It's all smoke and mirrors, mate. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's the picture they want to paint and put out to the world is what we're actually seeing, and who knows what's going on in the background. But unless they release their bank statements and all the rest of it, who knows? Shell corporations, this, and holding companies, that, and loans here and loans there. It's a fucking mess. And all we want to see is players on the pitch playing football.
Well, we've spent about an hour. We've probably spent 45 minutes of it talking about financials. And yes, we know we're an FPL podcast. We haven't forgot. But the main talk, we don't actually speak about FPL that much. You will just think we do. We talk about football and what happens on a pitch is a lot of what we talk about. And it should never not be about football.
Agreed. But we'll keep it going. Guys, I'm really fascinated for some feedback on this show as well. So do whack it in on Twitter or the comments on SoundCloud or YouTube, wherever this goes up, because we're doing a bit more of it with the people's poll, and people have asked us to talk about other shit. We're not opening that fucking Brexit can of worms, though, so do not fucking ask us to talk about that. But it has been interesting.
No, the people's poll this week, particularly as our feature podcast will be on the Sky game. Sorry again, guys.
Yeah.
The people's poll will be an FPL poll this week, I promise.
Indeed. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed listening to it. So do share it with any football fans that you think might be interested in just understanding a little bit more about what's going on in League One and League Two and some of these lower clubs. And if I've got anything wrong factually with the loans and all the rest of it, then forgive me, because finding what we can.
Fair game, mate.
There might not be, the loans might not exist, the interest rates might be.
You bought a book into this. I can't believe it. FPL, he just comes in and wings it. This guy's coming with statistical. Yeah, they owe 4.2 million to these bastards. Yeah, well done, mate. Great effort.
Thanks for listening. Anything else to add?
No, enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Only a week to go with this international break, and next week we can start getting into FPL again. So stay tuned. Other than that, ciao for now.
Cue music, man, child.
Messi,